and it was that moment there that made me fall in love with Animal Well. This quirky little puzzle platformer from Bigmode, which is obviously Video Game Donkey's publishing company, and this is the first game published by Bigmode, and it's a winner. It's a really, really brilliant game and something very special. Now, I've seen a lot of places calling this a Metroidvania. I don't agree with that necessarily. I would call it more of a puzzle platformer. To me, Metroidvania's obviously like Super Metroid or Castlevania, or more recently Hollow Knight. Those games to me are a wee bit more about combat and leveling and skills and abilities, whereas this game is just about the exploration, the platforming and the puzzles. Something more akin to Fez from back in the day, which was one of my favourite indie games. So before we maybe get on to more about that, I'll talk about the graphics and the sound. As you can see, the game I think looks brilliant. I think it looks lovely. The sort of the neon colours, the scan lines, and the effects from the animals and the grass moving when you touch it. Everything's just really, really cosy. There is a slight unnerving kind of feeling to the whole game. It can be very dark at places with only lamps illuminating the pillars in the background. You can see creatures moving in the background parts of the level sometimes, and you're not sure, are they coming to get your little blob character, which always reminds me of the early Tamagotchis from back in the 90s. I'm not entirely sure what you are, like some kind of tomato or something, or a grape from a plant, but it's cute nonetheless. You don't really need to know what it is. You don't really need to know much of what's going on in this game, but it really does have a unique look amongst a genre that is full of retro looking games. The atmosphere is further added to by the sound effects and the music. Sometimes the game can be quite quiet, just with the sound effects of animals in the background, you're jumping, the water running down the walls, little chimes clinking from the metal that you touch. It can be quite simple, but then at other times there's quite stirring, thoughtful music, like in the save room, which I suppose gives you a feeling of comfort, like in the same way as a Resident Evil game would, because this game only saves when you save it. There are no checkpoints, with the exception of if you press a switch and then you die, you will return to when you last saved it, but that switch will stay pressed. So you're maybe not having to do the whole puzzle again, but you'll still need to go back to where that switch was. Combat in the game is almost non-existent. You will be able to get items later on in the game, like a yo-yo or firecrackers, which can hurt or distract enemies. But there's not a lot of enemies in the game either. You will run across some animals and some boss animals, which can be quite horrific at times and actually give the game a slight horror vibe. The unsettling music and the unsettling look of the creatures can really be quite scary. But where this game really shines is in its secrets. There are so many hidden areas and little nooks and crannies that you can find, and there are collectibles to get in the form of eggs, which when you get certain amounts will unlock new areas that will give you further items. So it's definitely worth finding them, but some of them are really well hidden, and I've not found them all yet. I've found quite a lot, but I'm not sure how many are in the game total, but you'll definitely be racking your brain trying to find the last few. The overworld map as well that you find will give you no indication of where things are, except for the 4 flames that are the main quest as such that you're trying to get. You won't know where chests are, you won't know where switches are, so you'll need to attach pins to the map, and the map allows you to attach, I think it's around about 60 pins, and the advice would be to use that, because the game world, whilst not massive, is definitely big and deep enough to get lost in. Another major part of the gameplay is the platforming, and a platformer is no good if the controls aren't tight, and luckily Animal Well has very tight controls. That doesn't mean it's not tricky. It can be really tricky and sometimes infuriating because they have to be quite precise jumps or movements that you're making. And I've been really raging at times with some jumps that I've had to make, or I'm just missing out on a switch or whatever, but that's not the game's fault. That's usually just a little bit of trial and error, and you definitely feel like you're getting better at the game with better movement as you progress. The game isn't perfect though. There are a couple of gripes I have with it. One, as said before, would probably be the saving system. The game does tell you the last time that you saved. If you press the pause button, it'll say like 40 minutes since you last saved. That puts a bit of pressure on. You're suddenly like, if I don't get back to the save point, I'm going to lose a bunch of progress here and have to track all the way back. Maybe the occasional checkpoint or more common saves would help more people become accustomed to the game and maybe less likely to put it down and not go back to it after a rage quit. And as well, I found the movement between areas sometimes threw me off, more so when going from a vertical space down or up. Sometimes I didn't know where my character was on the screen. So if you're moving up on the screen, the game moves so quickly that sometimes you can be on the next panel and not even realise, and then dropping down again, and it can be a wee bit disorientating. I'll show a clip on screen to show what I mean, because I'm probably not describing it very well, but I did find that some of the transitions between areas were just a wee bit jarring. Ultimately though, Animal Well really is a special game. I absolutely adore it. It's one of my favourite games of the year already, and it's something about the vibe of the game, the feeling of the game. Yes, it's well made. Yes, it's lovingly crafted. Looks really good, if simple. Sounds brilliant. Plays brilliant. But there's something about the atmosphere of the game. It makes me feel nostalgic. It makes me excited about video games. Something that Fez did, or Super Meat Boy did back in the day, or more recently Hollow Knight. And I'm starting to realise that indie games are where it's at. They are where the real creativity is. And I suppose that has been the case for years now. But with the state of the industry and AAA gaming, people really need to play games like this. And at the moment, you can't do much better than Animal Well. It really is that good.